Hamas is losing the battle against the IDF in Gaza City, and the fight is looming over a Hamas symbol in the heart of that city. The IDF is advancing carefully, and many of the terrorists are fleeing, and the tallest tower in Gaza City has been brought down. However, Hamas still has some cards to play, mostly because they are still holding the hostages, and now they are playing psychological games claiming that they've lost contact with two of them. And in the north, the IDF struck a weapons depot of the Hezbollah terrorist organization in southern Lebanon over the last 24 hours, and from the south, the IDF intercepted another ballistic missile launched by the Houthis in Yemen. However, there are reports that the Houthis are training operatives for a ground invasion of Israel while building missile and UAV factories underneath the ground. And on the diplomatic front, Prime Minister Netanyahu met with Donald Trump and his administration and his special envoy, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner on Sunday evening to discuss President Trump's plan for ending the war in the Gaza Strip. President Trump claims that in these meetings there was significant progress towards an agreement and the negotiations to end this war in Gaza, and there are final stages that are yet to be seen. And speaking of final stages, Iran's Ayatollah regime and the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps have admitted that they are nearing collapse amidst new sanctions, domestic unrest, and the threat of new strikes, and not only from Israel. And we'll have some more details to tell you about this. Welcome to Boots on the Ground. I'm your host Yair Pinto, bringing you all the truth about what's happening in Israel. So on the eve of the strike by Division 98 against one of the terrorist organization's symbols in Gaza City, the IDF assesses that the local Hamas battalion will use all its capabilities that remain and have been restored. Also, in the last 24 hours, a 16-story Mecca tower in central Gaza City, which according to the IDF served Hamas as an observation platform, was struck, and a Nukhba terrorist who commanded the murder of the death shelter in the Re'im Israeli community on October 7 was eliminated. Meanwhile, Gazans are evacuated in masses from the city, and Hamas is losing control over the population. The IDF issued an evacuation notice to the Rimal and to the Sabra neighborhoods and to the port area in Gaza City, and the IDF is satisfied with the numbers and notes that the challenge that remains is guerrilla warfare. Now, moving forward, the soldiers inside Gaza are threatened mainly by long-range snipers and IEDs, bombs. Terrorists using guerrilla techniques try to attach charges to armored vehicles and are being eliminated at point-blank range by the IDF troops. And at the same time, the IDF also identifies another trend: terrorists who flee and leave behind empty positions. And amidst all of this kinetic activity, the issue of the hostages remains a concern. In what is believed to be a psychological warfare tactic, Hamas announced over the last 24 hours that they have lost contact with two hostages amidst the bombing campaign and demanded that the IDF stop the airstrikes in order to rescue them. And meanwhile, in the northern arena, the IDF is striking Hezbollah in southern Lebanon as they attempt to rebuild their positions. The explosions from all of the Hezbollah ordnance being demolished were heard dozens of kilometers away from the northern border between Israel and Lebanon into the Israeli country. On the diplomatic front, Prime Minister Netanyahu is in the United States, and on Sunday evening he held a long meeting in New York with the Trump administration's special envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, along with Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer. The topic of the meeting was President Trump's 21-point plan to end the war in the Gaza Strip, free the hostages, and set up a new governing mechanism in the Gaza Strip. An Israeli official spoke about the meeting, saying, "The gaps have narrowed. There is a good atmosphere towards a conclusion." Trump has said that his plan could open a door to a broader move of peace in the Middle East. Two core issues are reportedly at the center of the discussions: the involvement of the Palestinian Authority in the Gazan affairs and the disarmament of Hamas. On Monday, Netanyahu was scheduled to be President Trump's guest for a lunch at the White House, followed by a joint press conference. And meanwhile, Back in Israel, a missile launched by the Houthis in Yemen was intercepted on Sunday afternoon. But the real threat from the Houthis could be something much more dangerous than a ballistic missile and a drone. The IDF and the military intelligence have identified a technological buildup and a training program to replace the October 7th attack by the Houthi rebels, this time from Yemen, operating with Iranian support. Together, they are attempting to establish cells of terror operatives near Israel's borders to replace the massacre carried out by Hamas nearly 2 years ago and to duplicate that terrorist achievement. At the same time, Israel continues strikes in Yemen to disrupt the Iranian supply chain, thereby preventing the realization of this threat. And further afield, the United Nations Security Council has restored sanctions on Iran after the failure of talks with Europe on the nuclear issue. Officials in Tehran fear economic deterioration and public anger that threatens the regime's stability. Of course, the regime has a plan. They're going to keep threatening Israel until all their problems will go away. In recent days, regime officials have repeated the narrative that if Israel strikes Iran, this time they will show no mercy, but instead utterly destroy us. But that's not all. They're also threatening to rain down fire on the United States in the event of another conflict. So you see, we have a lot to talk about today. So let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what's happening in Israel on day 724 of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region that are operating under the command of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. A moment before we begin, guys, you gotta help us spread the truth about what's happening in Israel, because it matters for all of us. There are so many lies that are being spread against this tiny country, because this is a spiritual war. So how do you fight lies? You share the truth. How do you do that on YouTube? You leave a comment, hit the like, or hit the subscribe button so that you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. So we start today's report with a look at the fighting inside the Gaza Strip. The IDF is satisfied with the fact that the number of Gazan civilians who have evacuated from Gaza City and its surrounding areas is large. Certainly, the majority of residents have left the city already. And Division 98 is maneuvering inside the Shati camp area, where about 200,000 Gazan residents were left over the past week and moved to the El Mawasi area, a humanitarian zone in the south. This move greatly complicates matters for Hamas, which is beginning to lose its governing grip in that area. Hamas had estimated that it would manage to keep the residents from evacuating and use them as human shields. But now, they're left and the evacuation was accomplished much faster than either the IDF or Hamas anticipated. So the IDF has been able to take advantage of this to make rapid progress. Part of the reason things went so quickly is because the southern part of the Shati area was intentionally left open to allow the few thousands of residents remaining to leave that neighborhood. An IDF statement said that Shati has not truly felt until today the power of the IDF, as was the case in Rafah, Khan Yunis, and Sajaiya. That may soon change because, according to the IDF assessments, a large part of the tunnels in the neighborhood have not yet been discovered or have been restored since the previous maneuver, and therefore the operation is expected to be complex and require time and professional forces for tunnel busting and fire cover. The assessment is that it will be possible to destroy the tunnels and the buildings above them within about 2.5 months. And at the same time, the IDF warned that the Shati battalion of the Hamas terrorist organization has recovered and learned its lessons from the first maneuver, and therefore, from their side, the pursuit may develop into a local guerrilla attack on the scale of companies of terrorists once the army seizes some areas. And according to the assessments, Hamas will unload in the neighborhood what remains of its weapons, its mortars, and its terrorists who did not withdraw southward with the humanitarian effort of the civilians, and thus the neighborhood will remain booby-trapped until it is destroyed above and below the ground. It will not be easy to overcome these challenges, but the IDF is specializing in things that are not easy. On that note, Sunday evening saw an IDF strike on the Mecca Tower, which is a high-rise building that it said was used by Hamas terrorists in the Tel El-Hawa neighborhood in the southwestern part of Gaza City. This is a 16-story tower that is the tallest inside Gaza City, and according to the IDF, the building housed military infrastructure of the Hamas terrorist organization, which was used to promote and execute terrorist schemes against the IDF forces in that area. And prior to the strike, steps were taken to minimize the likelihood of harming uninvolved civilians as much as possible, including warning the population, the use of precision munitions, aerial observation, and additional intelligence. And meanwhile, despite all of these setbacks, Hamas isn't done fighting yet. And in recent days, they have placed IEDs in many places where they hope that the IDF will pass by and be hit by them. They are also harassing the IDF forces with sniper fire and attempts to raid strong points of the IDF. The intelligence echelon in Israel believes that at this point, Hamas knows that they cannot win, but they're trying to generate a propaganda buzz to try and avoid the appearance of a total defeat. That's why they fired an anti-aircraft missile at an Air Force helicopter this week, and there are also reports that they are trying to kidnap an IDF soldier. With that in mind, it is important to point out that the IDF is advancing a secure manner and sometimes forgoes speed to preserve the lives and the safety of our soldiers. Hamas appears to have many operatives who want to save their own lives, as the IDF has found many fighting positions abandoned, and the leadership of this group has been saying for months that Hamas would fight the IDF until their last bullet and their last drop of blood. But it seems that not everyone is on board with this idea. And in a related news, a Nukhba terrorist who commanded the Hamas forces who threw grenades into a bus stop and a bomb shelter on Route 232 in the Re'im area, which is an Israeli community adjacent to the Gaza Strip, which was packed filled with unarmed Israeli civilians on October 7, 2023, and murdered 16 innocent people, has itself been eliminated over the last 24 hours. The IDF and the Shin Bet announced that the terrorist responsible for this attack, Hassan Mahmoud Hassan Hussein, who served as a Nukhba platoon commander in the El Burish battalion of Hamas's Central Camp Brigade, also took part in the kidnapping of Israeli civilians. And since October 7th, he has continued to lead Hamas fighters in battles against the IDF. But he won't be doing any of that any longer because he was taken out by the IDF in an airstrike. And meanwhile, Hamas's military wing claimed on Sunday that contacts have been lost with 2 hostages held by the Hamas terrorist organization. According to them, this occurred due to a massive military action and heavy bombardments in the Sabra and the Tel Hawa neighborhoods of Gaza City during the last 48 hours. In a statement published by the terrorist organization Hamas, it was said that the prisoners' lives are in real danger, and that Israel is required to cease airstrikes for 24 hours starting at 6 p.m. this evening, and also advance immediately southward up to Street 8 to allow an attempt to rescue the hostages. The announcement about the loss of contacts with 2 hostages was published in parallel to reports that intensive dialogue is being conducted around United States President Donald Trump's 21-point narrative ahead of his meeting with Netanyahu at the White House. So the Trump plan, which Israel's intelligence echelon assesses has a high probability of success, has details including the comprehensive release of all the hostages in a single deal, even within about 72 hours. And the IDF is therefore operating in the areas where hostages are believed to be held in a calculated manner, while drawing lessons from the fighting in other areas such as in Khan Yunis and also in Rafah. And here at TBN Israel, we will continue to bring you all the truth about what's happening in Israel, and this is the time to spread the truth and to share our content. Continue to stand with Israel, and the most important thing to do is do not forget to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. So now, I want to tell you a short story about why we are fighting this war. 2-year-old Hadar was riding with her mother near Shiloh, north of Jerusalem, when a terrorist drove straight into them. She fought for her life in intensive care, but after a few days of this fight, she was gone. Her 5 siblings were left in pieces, shattered, terrified, silent, and broken. But thanks to the Shiloh Israel Children Fund, they began trauma therapy, and slowly they started to heal. But they're not alone. Thousands of Israeli children carry invisible wounds from terror and also from war. They suffer from nightmares and anxiety, and many of them suffer in silence, worrying that no one will understand, and if they speak up, it will only cause them more problems. Shiloh Israel Children's Fund gives these children the tools to rebuild. Through creative therapies, including art, music, and movement, they learn to express the pain that they cannot explain. And step by step, they find their way back to life. Since October 7th, the need has surged beyond capacity. Shiloh Israel Children's Fund now brings therapy directly to affected communities and offers open studio sessions for early intervention. This is urgent. These children are the future of Israel, and they need us now. So if you want to help the children of Israel, go to israelchildren.org/help. Again, that's israelchildren.org/help. Don't look away, don't wait. Be part of a reason that a child heals in Israel. And now, we are switching our focus to the northern arena. In the last 24 hours, the IDF, led by the Northern Command, struck Hezbollah weapons depots in southern Lebanon. The IDF spokesperson stated, "The presence of these terrorist infrastructures constitutes a violation of the understandings between Israel and Lebanon, and the IDF will continue to act in order to remove any threat to the state of Israel." On Israel's diplomatic front, ahead of Prime Minister Netanyahu's meeting with United States President Donald Trump at the White House on Monday, the 4th meeting between the two since January, there was reportedly another tension amongst the team members. Earlier, it was published that in an unusual step, the Prime Minister cancelled all his scheduled planned meetings for Monday morning in order to work on the details regarding Trump's 21-point plan, both with his own people and with President Trump's senior aides. Envoys of US President Donald Trump, including his Jewish son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, held a meeting with Netanyahu at his New York hotel that continued into the early hours of Monday morning. At the end of these meetings, an Israeli source expressed optimism about the chances of closing the deal and said, "There is a good atmosphere toward the conclusion. There is significant progress towards understandings." What we know about these understandings so far is that the Palestinian Authority, in one form or another, will need to be involved in the Gaza Strip after this war, and Hamas must be disarmed. However, there is some concern that Arab states have managed to influence the president and blur the Israeli demand to disarm Hamas and collapse its military and its governmental abilities. The concessions required of Israel, according to the reports, include a commitment not to annex any area in Judea and Samaria or the Gaza Strip, as well as commitments to never again try to assassinate anyone in Qatar. In addition, negotiations will be held on any IDF withdrawal from the Gaza Strip. Hamas, for its part, will be required to release all the hostages on the first day and dismantle all perimeter weapons. Every Gazan will be given the option to leave if they wish, with a promise that he will be able to one day return to the Gaza Strip. Under this plan, Gaza will become an international free trade area with customs exemptions, and the Palestinian Authority will participate in the managing committee after agreed-upon reforms will be completed. In parallel, it was reported that Hamas is expected to be exposed to the details of Trump's 21-point proposal already in the coming 24 hours. Sources familiar with the matter cast great doubts on whether Trump's initiative will be received openly by the terrorist organization, Hamas, which in fact was decided over its head. and Prime Minister Netanyahu also expresses skepticism regarding parts of the initiative, though not for all of it. So stay tuned, because we will continue to bring you all the truth. Give a click on the like button, leave a comment, and make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. And now we are switching our focus to another threat to Israel, and that's the threat that's coming from the Houthi terrorist organization in Yemen. Alerts were activated overnight between Sunday and Monday in several areas in the central of the Israeli country, following the launch of a single missile from the direction of Yemen. The defense system successfully intercepted this threat, and as a reminder, last week the IDF completed a wide wave of strikes in Sana'a, the capital city of Yemen, against Houthi targets, including military headquarters and UAV depots, suicide drone places. So according to the assessments, 50 Houthi operatives were eliminated and hundreds were wounded. This was the 15th strike in Yemen at the distance of 2,200 kilometers from Israel, and about 20 fighter jets took part in this strike, dropping 65 munitions, the highest number of any single strike to date. And as part of the strike that was dubbed Operation Passing Package, 7 targets were attacked, including 5 headquarters in seized areas and 2 weapons depots in which there were UAVs. However, despite all the damage the Houthis have sustained from these Israeli strikes, in recent months, the defense establishment has identified significant progress in the Houthis' capabilities inside Yemen. This includes local production of missiles and UAVs that are using advanced engineering systems, and the placement of facilities in underground infrastructures designed to protect the weapons and make their detection and bombing very difficult. The model used in Yemen reflects an Iranian pattern previously deployed, reducing dependency on external supply chains and building production lines and warehouses inside the country's mountains or in underground excavations, which makes it very difficult to strike the missile and the UAV production plants. The IDF is also tracking a pattern of recruitment and training of local militias in Yemen, including courses aimed at training fighting groups for large-scale invasion operations. According to the sources, one of the names that are heard on the intelligence lines is of course dubbed Tufa al-Aqsa, related to Jerusalem, whose aim was stated is to train forces for a wide invasion that would simulate the October 7th model, but carried out from multiple directions. And according to Amman, the Israeli intelligence agency, and their assessments, the plan, if carried out, may be planned to start from the southern eastern part, meaning Jordan, or from Syria, and in some cases, even from a combination of 2 directions or more, in an effort to blur tracks and to direct routes for arrival from Yemen. So the IDF assesses that Israeli strikes on seaports and external supply routes are foiling part of the streams from Iran, but at the same time are strengthening the Houthis' desire to adapt by developing local and protected production areas underneath the ground or between mountains. It is also important to note that 2 dedicated units focused on Houthis were recently established in the IDF's military intelligence, and including dozens of researchers and resources intended to locate operational and intelligence centers of gravity. The military intelligence chief, Major General Shlomi Binder, ordered the strengthening of resources to locate key targets and plan actions that will reduce the Houthis' mobilization ability as a long-term threat. However, IDF officials expressed caution regarding the ability to achieve a quick solution in this situation. The central concern is that the progress in the production in the storage infrastructures will enable the Houthi terrorist organization and the partner actors in this region to reach a quantity of range and precision missiles that would present an existential threat to the State of Israel. And consequently, the Israeli preparedness includes continued targeted strikes focused on intelligence collection and strengthening the ability to locate and strike underground facilities and technical and expert personnel connected to these projects. And here at TBN Israel, we will continue to bring you all the information that you need to know about what's happening in this complex reality here surrounding Israel. We are under an unprecedented media onslaught. Lies, half-truth. We need your help to share the truth of what's happening in Israel. You can do that by leaving a comment, hitting the like button, making sure to hit the subscribe button, and share these videos with anybody who wants to know the truth about Israel. That's how it works. And now, we're switching our focus to the news coming out of Iran. According to a Reuters report published on Sunday, the Ayatollah regime is facing one of the most serious crises since the Islamic Revolution in 1979, caught between growing discontent at home and a stalled nuclear deal that has left the country more isolated and divided than ever. The United Nations Security Council reimposed sanctions on Iran on Saturday after the latest effort at talks between Tehran and the European states, Britain, France, and Germany failed to resolve the latest confrontation over Iran's nuclear program. So without a breakthrough in the talks with the West, 4 Iranian officials and 2 sources predicted that Iran's economic isolation will deepen further and spark public anger. However, accepting Western demands threatens to split the ruling elite and sideline the Islamic Republic's revolutionary benefits in non-submission to the Western pressures that define Tehran's resolute stance. But in other words, the Ayatollah regime and the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps are just about of any options. There are no choices that they can make that will lead to good outcomes for themselves. They only have choices that will lead to bad solutions, and they have to pick something because doing nothing will also lead to a bad outcome. As a reminder, the war between Iran and Israel and the United States broke out one day before a planned 6th round of talks with Washington on Tehran's nuclear program, and United States President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu warned that they would not hesitate to strike Iran again if it resumes uranium enrichment, a possible path to develop a nuclear weapon. The United States, its European allies, and Israel accused Tehran of using the nuclear program as a cover for attempts to develop a weapons production capability, while Iran claims that its nuclear program is intended for peaceful purposes only, a claim that no one believes any longer. And authorities in Iran said that renewed sanctions would push them to a tougher nuclear posture, but the threat of Israeli attacks has left them with a little room to maneuver. So, with Trump's rapid revival of the maximum pressure campaign on Tehran since February, with new sanctions and threats of further military action, a second source said that some decision makers in Tehran believe that maintaining the status quo, no war, no deal, and continued talks is the best option without offering further concessions. However, the new measures could significantly increase pressure on Iran's economy and further restrict its trade with countries that previously ignored unilateral US sanctions. UN sanctions include restrictions on Iran's oil, banking, and finance sectors, an arms embargo, a ban on uranium enrichment or reprocessing, a ban on activities with ballistic missile capable of carrying nuclear warheads, and a global asset freeze, and also travel bans on Iranian individuals and also entities. And Iran's religious establishment is now facing growing public anger over the deterioration, the collapse of the Iranian economy. But despite all of this, the regime continues blaming everyone but themselves for all the terrible situation that they're in. And they're still making threats to annihilate Israel and even to attack the United States of America. And former IRGC commander Mohsen Razai declared on Sunday that Iran will hit the United States military bases in this region if Israel attacks the Islamic Republic once more. He also said that Tehran will not accept negotiations with Western countries that grant Israel time to prepare or strengthen its position. Razai told state television, appearing again in a military uniform, that negotiations whose purpose is to give Israel time to strengthen are unacceptable. If this happens, the moment that Israel starts a war, we too will enter a war with the United States. He added that negotiations must not be accepted in any form, at any price, or without conditions. If we enter negotiations, the use of military force against Iran must not be employed in any kind of way. Otherwise, we will respond in kind, not only against Israel, but also against the American targets in this region. He also said that in the 12-day war, we used only 30% of our capability. We prepared ourselves for a 2-month war and did not use some of the missiles that we have not yet revealed. If the war had continued for 2 months today, nothing would have remained of Israel. The Israelis want to try the military luck again against Iran. If that happens, we will use all of our forces, change our red lines, and things will happen that it is not right for me to say right now. So I cannot let any of that pass without making a comment. I do not believe for 1 second that Iran only used 30% of its striking power against Israel in the 12-day war. I'm quite certain that they were doing everything that they could while Israel did the same, and the results speak for themselves. I'm not sure who the target audience of General Ghazi's speech were, but if he was trying to intimidate Israelis like me, then he failed miserably. If, on the other hand, he was trying to reassure himself and his fellow war criminals in the Ayatollah regime, I have to believe that at this point, on some level, even they know it's not true and they should stop lying to everyone, especially to themselves. And here, at TBN Israel, we will continue to speak the truth, especially to ourselves, here, to you. And at this one point, the way to fight all these lies is to spread the truth. So if you have people that are asking what's going on in Israel, just give them this video. Make sure to like, leave a comment, and subscribe. We know that it's important, and we need all the help that we can get to let people what's happening, and then so that they will know how to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. This is a spiritual war. The best thing that we can do is to pray for this situation. I want to conclude today's report with an IDF hero who fell defending the state of Israel. So it was clear for publication on Sunday evening that Staff Sergeant Inbar Avram Kad, 20 years of age, who was critically wounded in the attack at the jet junction in Samaria in the afternoon near Kdumim, an Israeli community, died of his wounds at the Beilinson Hospital in Petah Tikva, which is an Israeli city. So the fallen was a resident of Lotem and was a soldier in the battalion 890 of the paratroopers brigade. So I want to call on all of you to continue and spread the truth, and above all, pray. Pray for the families of the IDF soldiers that are risking their lives every day defending us against all these terrorist regimes, fighting to bring peace to our children and to release our hostages. Continue to pray for wisdom to our leaders, to your leaders, to Trump, to Netanyahu, to all the leaders of the world. Let's pray for the innocent people that are affected by this conflict. Let's pray for the people of Gaza that as they are evacuating from Gaza City and see that the IDF is not their enemy and is establishing humanitarian areas for them to reside in, will see the true nature of Hamas and this terrorist organization. Let's pray that all the schemes against Israel that are coming out of Yemen or Iran will not succeed. Let's pray for our enemies, not to succeed against us, but to start loving on the people of Israel. Let's pray for our revival. Let's pray for God to change the hearts of all the enemies of Israel. Let's keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.